Alright guys, second time doing this video because the first time the audio screwed up. It was all... It ended up being a connection on the back of the mic. But Star Citizen development outlasted an entire console generation. And on the other hand, Cyberpunk was undercooked and should have taken more time to develop. Really? It amazes me the mental gymnastics that game media is able to try and pull off. Cyberpunk, undercooked, should have taken longer. Star Citizen, how dare you not release the game? Seems like they just want to whinge about anything, don't they? But let's jump into it. And I must admit, this article itself, I want to say, it's actually not a bad article. I do have some of the problems with some of the stuff that he has written. But at the end of the day, he is somewhat optimistic. A little bit. Let me go. So let's jump into it. So we'll break it down. This is obviously from the 4th of December. So yeah, let's jump into it. Remember the first time I wrote a story about Star Citizen, I was talking to my brother, a massive fan of Freelancer and Wing Commander series in his own right, saying, hey, the dude behind Wing Commander and Freelancer is doing this thing. And we both looked at it and thought, SHIT, this is the kind that we've been missing. Game we've been missing. So we've written plenty about Star Citizen, as you expect of the game with a huge budget, larger than most AAA games, and their marketing budgets combined. I disagree with that. Cyberpunk, they estimate, cost $315 million. Now that's their official announcement. I think that's underestimating it. Right, we know that Star Citizen has around 500 or so, 550 devs, I think it was at the last count. 550 staff, sorry. They're not all devs. You know, they have QA testers, they have admin staff, they have managers, they have, all that sort of stuff, right? Devs combined, they're around 350 to 400. Now, we know that Cyberpunk had 500 devs, from my understanding. 500 devs, $100,000 a dev. You're looking at around $50 million a year, or around $400 million, for an 8-year game. So I think the 450 to 500 is probably more closer to the cost. But if you want to talk about just devs, you would obviously need an exact number for Star Citizen. Also keeping in mind that the dev costs have obviously gone up into like a stagger, because they obviously started with 3 and by the end of the first year only had like 50 devs or 50 people working for them. So obviously you got to take that into account. It's like a compounding interest sort of thing. But even just using their current dev costs or dev amounts now, they're only up at around the $320 million. Now, like I said, they didn't have 500 devs the whole time. I'm just doing a lazy analysis. I'm just saying they had 500 the whole time. Even that still would not rival that of what, for example, Cyberpunk has put out. Now, he said here that AAA game and budget. Most AAA games are cookie-cutter games. Most AAA games are games that have already come out. There's sequels of sequels of sequels. For example, NBA 2K19, NBA 20K, NBA 21. There's not a lot to do in the difference between those games. Right? There's very little that's changed. They're all cookie-cutter games. So, yes, the cost of producing the next Call of Duty, for example, is not going to be high. Why? Because they already have most of the work done. They have already the engine, they have already the gameplay mechanics. All they're doing is simply adding a few new things and adding a few new maps. Star Citizen doesn't have any of that. It had to build everything from scratch. They've literally had to buy the building, for example. So at the end of the day, the dev cost or the cost for Star Citizen is vastly more than what it normally would for any cookie-cutter game. Now, obviously, when they go through and make Squadron 42 Part 2, Part 3, yes, it's a 3-part trilogy, then at the end of the day, that's obviously going to be a lot faster. And even Chris has admitted this. Chris has said, obviously, once they've done Part 1, they're going to have the mechanics and everything down pat. Then they'll be able to bump out Part 2, Part 3, and in a more reasonable time frame. So at the end of the day, comparing Star Citizen to some cookie-cutter AAA game that's got already the history to bank on is really unfair, and it's really disingenuous. But let's keep going. For one, a look at the Kickstarter when Star Citizen, Double Fine had just showed the potential of crowdfunding with Broken Age. So after the initial discussion in 2010 and starting working on the prototype in 2011, yes, but the Kickstarter wasn't until 2012, Star Citizen took to Kickstarter. It raised in 2012, by the way. It raised 2.1 million at the time, with another 4.1 million raised directly through the Star Citizen website. At least he's done his research. I will give him credit for that. That was back in October 2012. Now, 8 years on, much of the appetite for the crowdfunding video games has completely evaporated. Most board games, particularly with high-quality miniatures, can still raise millions. And while there are still some high-professional successes, Iron Harvest being the one that's done well, most of the excitement has been dampened by projects that never saw the light of day or games that never came close to their original promise. Just think of what's happened to the people's careers since Star Citizen was in development is wild. Almost 5 years ago, Gillian Anderson was recording motion capture for Squadron 42, Star Citizen's single-player component that we might, probably won't, see next year. Maybe a beta at the end of the year, most likely beta early next year, probably, was my guess. Anderson's career has had a massive resurgence since then with shows like Hannibal, Masters of Sex. Don't know either of those. I know what Hannibal is. I've seen the movies. Recently with a turn as Margaret Thatcher in The Crown. So I guess you could say Star Citizen did really well getting in early. But it's funny. The historically worthwhile reading back on how optimistic many of those early updates were. Back in 2015, we reported that the game's scope had already blown well past the original 24 release date. At the time, the developers were already starting to talk anonymously about how some of their time had been wasted building out features that were simply scrapped shortly after. The amount of features that were scrapped were minimal, right? Features haven't been scrapped. They've been stuck on a server and they've left there. Now, is that a waste of development? Sure, some of that coding will have to be rewritten. Yes. You go back to the original CryEngine, for example, back into the original Star Citizen demo or alpha, and when it was running on CryEngine, you could turn on and off gravity in ships. You could turn on the ship's power on and off, turn the reactors on and off, stuff like that. We lost that ability when it went over to Lumberyard because of difference in coding. There's slight differences, even though it is based on the original CryEngine. Those features have not been reincorporated back in. There were features that were supposed to be reincorporated that they didn't reincorporate at the time because at the end of the day, there were major bugs and issues just getting 3.1 or version 3 out the door. I think it was 3 or 2.8, maybe. I'm not quite sure what the version was. I think it was 3, actually. Getting 3 out the door. It was delayed for almost a year as it was. I think it was like 8 or 9 months behind. Just because of the amount of bug fixing they had to go through and fix. So at the end of the day, they left things off because it would have taken longer to get 3 out the door than it already did. Jared was already looking like a Wookiee, and at the end of the day, he really needed to shave. No, but all seriousness, at the end of the day, obviously they wanted 3 out the door. Now, the rest of those features that have not been incorporated, yes, some of them will need a recoding because obviously the code has changed. But some of that work will still be there. The basics will still be there. Things like, for example, gravity on and off when it comes to your ship and stuff. At the end of the day, that is stuff that they can re-add at a later date. Now, I'm looking forward to that sort of stuff. But there are some things that were scrapped. For example, they talk about here, for instance, there's a tale from early on Star Citizen's development about having to find an in-game helmet to access the Arena Commander menu. I don't remember that. That was before my time. But probably, possibly, yeah. But I'm kind of glad they scrapped that. I like accessing Arena Commander from the menu. I really do. As the rest of the industry broke new ground in other ways, we had the first mid-console generation refresh. VR went mainstream. Real-time tracing became possible in video games for the very first time. We saw massive shifts in the industry business model from crowdfunding to microtransactions. Games became punishingly hard again. But the Kickstarter wave and growth of platforms like Steam also meant that people had a much wider variety to much wider range of short form experiences to enjoy. And some of those have left a mark on the industry just as much as any AAA game. You can trace the last 5 years of rogue-like games, including highly successful Slay the Spire. I don't know that game. Back to the astonishing, brilliant FTL. Don't know if I know that one either. Undertale is a game so much better than what we deserve. I don't know that one. No Man's Sky went through a roller coaster of roller coasters that became the class study of strength and survival in the facing of overwhelming adversity, which you slammed at the time for being undercooked. This is the problem with games journalists. They will sit there and complain about a game being undercooked, but then will also complain about a game taking too long to come out. Yes, we don't obviously want the game to be coming out when we're all dead in the grave, right? We'd like to play it in our generation or our lifetime. And we will. And I'm probably going to be playing it after I do this review. But at the end of the day, we also don't want the game rushed. We don't want another Cyberpunk. So on the other side of indie games like Legend of... are you really comparing Star Citizen to Leagues of Legends? League of Legends was fun, but not as good as Dota, back when Star Citizen was first raising crowdfunding. I don't know why you even putting those two in the same sentence, man. Like, really? It now has a majority player account equivalent to the budget of most major studios. Long-awaited mobile release, which almost guaranteed to rack up 10 million players. Oh, God, really? We're pushing for mobile games now. Star Citizen hopefully will never be a mobile game. And it's days away from launching in Australia. You can go play your League of Legends, bro. Fortnite was originally a co-op game about fighting off waves of zombies, a game that nobody understood. Today, Fortnite practically... if you're really comparing Star Citizen to Fortnite or League of Legends, yeah, please don't. Companies' entire franchises have become and gone in the time that Star Citizen was in development. Cyberpunk 27 is days away from the launch. Remember, this is back in December. Another project that has been on the burner for about as long as the Star Citizen. It's actually been on slightly longer. Cyberpunk was started mid-2012, and Star Citizen's Kickstarter was at the end of 2012. There's about 6 months difference between it. And by the way, Cyberpunk, largely undercooked. And there were things from Cyberpunk that were cut as well. You can actually go up to the transit station in the game, but you can't ride the train because it was cut from the game. There was also talk about possibly having manticores and climbing the buildings with the manticores, or having flying cars. All that stuff was cut because of time constraints. So even Cyberpunk, in this instance, even though it's a buggy mess, especially on consoles, last-gen consoles, and I'm going to do another video about that because I have a theory about why. But even Cyberpunk, as it is, was still had to cut things from the game in order to get it out. Now, at the end of the day, I don't know about you guys, but I would much rather Star Citizen come out in a somewhat completed state. Yes, we will probably get a limited release, meaning we'll probably get gameplay for about 5 or 6 different things, probably about 5 or 10 systems, and then they're slowly going to add to it over time. That's probably what's going to happen, but regardless. But at the end of the day, even talking about Cyberpunk, which is nowhere near the scope of Star Citizen, even that that's taken just as long to come out. So, and that was a buggy mess with features that were cut. So, don't get me wrong, I like Cyberpunk, I really, really do. But, let's not hold that up as the holy grail of games to be games. Even on PC, it's still pretty bad. Like I say, try and catch the train. You can't. The train's sometimes there, but the train station and you can't enter it. It's all been cut from the game for now. Probably in the new DLC it's coming out. Right. CryEngine So instance what games is built on, it's hard to imagine any of the Star Citizen developers wouldn't jump at the chance to go back in time to reverse the decision to use CryEngine, a choice which has been a constant source of technical and legal complications, with legal stuff was all thrown out. And while it was made, I think they settled out of court, but anyway. And while it made sense for Chris Roberts to use CryEngine at the time, it was a little more mature in 2011 when Chris was building out the original prototype. It looks disastrous in hindsight, given that Star Citizen's severe feature creep and Crytek's continued struggles. They don't actually use CryEngine anymore. They're actually using Lumberyard, which is based on CryEngine, but has branched off into its own direction. So yeah, you imagine a tree. Yes, they come from the same root, but they're different branches on that tree. So they have a quote here, as Kotaku put it a few years ago by a source within Cloud Imperium Games. CryEngine was a fine pick when 500,000 was all they were looking for, and they needed to build a technical game. You can't build your own space engine for 500,000, but you can with 100 million. In order to make Star Citizen work, it needs proprietary tech. A lot of what is happening was to do with rewriting CryEngine in order to make it do what was needed. That obviously slowed everything down. Well, Lumberyard now. And stuff like object container streaming, iCache, server persistence, all this sort of stuff. Server meshing. Yes, this is stuff that obviously Star Citizen is obviously having to rewrite or to put into the game. And this will obviously benefit Lumberyard in the future, which is, I think, why CryEngine really wanted to take him to court. But at the end of the day, this is stuff that Lumberyard will benefit from, and hopefully there will be some kickback to Star Citizen for that licensing, for that. But yeah, they are having to rewrite mass amounts of new proprietary tech. Yes. Because nobody has done this before. No one has built the game like this before. The closest thing is Dual Universe. And that's a bit of a buggy mess when you go to a social space. You will literally get 30k'd like 6 or 8 times just trying to buy something and then get back to your ship. You can definitely build a pretty good engine for more than 550 million, which Star Citizen hasn't raised. I don't know why you're talking about that. But even if money wasn't the issue, Star Citizen's lengthy development is just an extreme version of the problems seen throughout all kinds of development. You start doing one thing and then pivot to something else, the Star Marine module in this case, and you have to pivot halfway through that thing again. Okay, so this is where you're not understanding what they're doing with Star Citizen. The FPS module, Star Marine, that's not them pivoting from one to the other. Not really. That is them working on the FPS shooter aspect that was always supposed to be in the game. Yes, it is a module that was added to the game. Yes, but it's something that was always going to be in the game. They weren't pivoting from one and then got bored and then pivoted to the other. That was something that they actually wanted in the game. So they built the module for it. I don't know what you mean by pivoting, but regardless. It's not factoring the human problem either. There's challenges of distributing development. Star Citizen's development was also rocketed by the forced restructure of each studio's pipeline, processes and management to better match how Foundry 42, the home of Star Citizen's British dev team, yeah. It was also a logical choice according to the source on the project, but it also burnt up a lot of time and we saw a string of redundancies and departures as management sorted out the growing pains. Anyway, it's ultimately kept Star Citizen going over the years as a combination of promise and never-ending support from fans. It's not really never-ending, but regardless. Even after the years of delays and lack of charity on what on a final release, or at least a version 1, will look like. But we do know what the final version will look like. We know exactly what it's going to look like. It looks very much like it is now, but with more gameplay and more planets. I don't understand what you mean by we don't know what the final version's going to look like. A big, immersive open world where you basically can do whatever you want. It's going to look like what it is now with the demo, except at the tech demo or pre-alpha, what do you want to call it. But there's going to be more systems. There's going to be more gameplay. And, yeah. You know, we know medical's got to come in. We know salvage has got to come in. We know refueling's got to come in. Exploration's got to come in. But apart from that, that's pretty much it. Server meshing, iCache we should be getting maybe end of March, most likely end of July. And then I would expect server meshing probably the end of this year, early next year. Start of the year after. The next year now, yeah. Alright, what do we get up to? What should we look like? Star Citizen raises more money than ever and continues support with a bit of private investor backing. The private investing is not really much there, but anyway. Which means Chris Robert and co can continue moving forward without having to without having to push to quit the same deadline. Quite the same deadline. Push to quit the same deadline? Whatever. Or make the same degrees of savage cuts that other studios face. That's not a bad thing. Having to cut features from your game is not a good thing. Having to cut game features, like for example, the transit system in Cyberpunk. That is a bad thing, having to cut that. Having to cut flying cars is a bad thing from your game. Game has always had an extraordinary level of talent, and in the last years or so, some of that is starting to come to the fore. But it's a game. It's largely in the same space it was a few years ago. That's not necessarily true. A series of visual improvements, vertical slices. It's nowhere near close to a complete package. That would be true. And only a brave person would put a date on whether all pieces might come together. Well, I'm brave. Getting solid projections on Squadron 42, the original single-player adventure. The crux of the original Kickstarter is troublesome enough. I would say Kickstarter beta, you're probably looking at the start of next year. We'll also head into the new next generation of consoles. That's not a bad thing, actually. We'll talk about that in a sec. And deal with the never-ending nightmare of actually getting those. Star Citizen's development carries on. It's been going on for so long that some of the feature-forward tech that Chris Roberts spoke about is now major selling points of Sony and Microsoft. Tell me one game that is running some sort of server meshing, object container streaming, iCache. iCache is pretty common, but those sort of things. Tell me some game that competes to Star Citizen. The closest thing you could probably make an argument for is Elite Dangerous or No Man's Sky. Elite Dangerous is peer-to-peer, so it's not even running the same server config. The most you can have with Elite Dangerous that I start having before having problems is around 3 or 4 players on your team. Same with No Man's Sky. I think you can only have 4 players or so, 4 players on your team on the same server. You can have more people on the server, but only 4 of those can be in your party. I think it's 4. So like I say, at the end of the day, you know, like even those games, which are probably the most comparable, don't match. Cyberpunk, I don't know if Cyberpunk uses some sort of object container streaming. I presume it does, which is why I think we're having major problems. I think that's more hard drive related, but we'll get to that later. That's another video. But at the end of the day, like even Cyberpunk, you could probably make an argument for as having the same sort of tech. But, yeah, we're starting to see the problems with that already. That's not even perfect already. So, I don't know. Arguing that Sony and Microsoft is using some of this groundbreaking tech. Really? What game are you talking about, bro? I really like to know. And even this year, the studio is still introducing new video series and talking about processes to communicate what they're working on. The communication with your fan base is not a bad thing. I'm sorry, but if you think that is, you need another job, bro. I'm still a little hopeful, only because I want the next generation of fans experience. I backed almost a decade ago, although based on my recent experiences, there's quite some way to go. In case you're wondering what experience is like, he's now, and then... So he's gone through and he's posted this. And he's wrote, my ship just literally vanished. And he's posted a photo of here, which is the ship landing on the planet. He's obviously then got out of the ship. And when he comes back, the ship's vanished. Now, my question is this. First of all, the ground doesn't look like it's the same area as the ship. So, like, there's the hut. There's the hut there. Right, that's right. But when you look at this, this part here, this big part here, actually look like it's this part. So, that grass patch there, I think is this part over here. Now, obviously the ship's gone, yes. I'd like to know why. I'd like to know, A, was this his ship or was he borrowing someone else's? We don't know exactly what's going on here, right? And it's no video, it's just screenshots. I play Star Citizen. I played it for about 5 hours yesterday. I didn't have my ship disappear on me once. Now, at the end of the day, did I have bugs? Sure, yeah. I had a 30k, which caused me to crash into the planet because apparently when you're 30k, your ship likes to fall from the sky. But at the end of the day, out of 5.5 hours, 130k is definitely not bad. It's still very much in alpha. It's still very much in development. It's not a finished game. And like I say, yeah. But at the end of the day, if that's what you're going by, like, my question is this. When you played Star Citizen this time, when you went through and played it, and you went through and you had this disappearing ship, how long did you play it for? Was this the only time that you had the bug? Was this the only time you signed in, where you signed in for half an hour and you had this and then thought, yep, I got my problem. I've got my major situation of what the game looks like. I can log off now. Did you keep playing it? Were you playing for 5 hours and this was the only instance? It seems like to me that you're very much cherry picking a situation and claiming that's what the game looks like. Like I said, I played it yesterday for 5 hours, 5.5 hours, and I didn't have that problem. Now, this is back in October 2020, and this article was written in December, so you sat on this for 2 months? Like, I don't know. Don't know about you guys, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. Like I say, you know, like there's a big difference between those two. What, you didn't play the free fly? I don't know. It just seems like he's cherry picking the situation here. And like I say, they don't actually show you what the game actually looks like now. There's a bit of a screenshot there, but you know, there's no video showing you what the game looks like. Because if they did that, they'll break their narrative. You know, like I actually have a recording of... This is from December 16. So I'll just mute myself so you don't hear the audio for that. Windows capture. There you go. And like this is me actually playing the game. You know, like, yeah. And I actually think I went through and actually... Yeah, there's the Titan. Went flying. Landed the ship. So it's on pad 4. It's still on pad 4 because there's the marker. There it is there, pad 4 still. Still on pad 4. It's still on pad 4. Like, I didn't have this problem. So, you know, and I don't know why you did. It's like, it's literally still there. You can, like, there's the marker here. So there it is there. Pad 4. So it's still there. It's been there for like 15 minutes now. They're probably going to store it sooner or later, actually. So, you know, and like, it's still there. It's still on pad 4. It's still on pad 4. Like, it's still there. So, like, it was there for... So, from 20 to... It was there for like 7 minutes, at least. And it was probably there longer. This is when the video ends. So, like I said, you know, I didn't have the problem that you did. Now, I'm not saying you didn't have it. I'm just saying that maybe he cherry-picked the cherry-picked the instance. But anyway, guys, let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. I'm going to say, like I say, I want to give the guy credit for... He has put a somewhat decent review of the game up. You know, it's not as bad as some of the hit pieces that we've seen. Full credit where credit is due. But at the end of the day, yeah, like I say, yes, there is bugs. Yes, there are problems. But at the end of the day, it's an alpha. They're still in development. They still haven't ironed out all the bugs. They're still building the tech. And, you know, at the end of the day, we're just going to wait for Star Citizen. Yes, there is a reasonable time frame that we are waiting. But at the end of the day, you know, there is going to be a point where we get sick of waiting. But at the moment, we see the potential that they're doing. And at the moment, I don't have much of a problem with what Star Citizen's doing, to be honest. I'm really looking forward to this new year, 2021. Looks like there's going to be a lot of good stuff coming in this year. Hopefully, fingers crossed. And hopefully we'll get a lot of the back-end server stuff, like server meshing and stuff, and that'll really bring the game in. And then they'll have to find something else to complain about. Apart from that, guys, let me know what your thoughts are in that comment section below. If this video has been helpful, please smack that like button. If you're new to the channel, welcome and subscribe. Apart from that, guys, obviously I do stream on Twitch sometimes. Yeah. And obviously at the end of the day, obviously stay tuned for the channel for obviously more Star Citizen or more game-related videos. Apart from that, guys, smack that like button. If you're new to the channel, welcome and subscribe. Have a great night, enjoy yourself, and we'll see you in the universe.